Last month, we continued with the subsection entitled The Centers and the Senses, Normal and Supernormal. That's the full title. Here we learned that the subplanes for all human endeavor include the 5 highest subplanes of the physical and astral planes and the 5 lowest subplanes of the mental plane. Left out are the 2 lowest of both physical and astral planes. When, we're told, a disciple is able to function on the 3rd subplane of the mental plane, then the influence of the 1st and 2nd subplanes become more important than the influence of the lower 4 subplanes and the whole lower quaternary in general. It pitches you upwards once you gain awareness on this 3rd subplane of the mental plane. Ability to tap into these abstract mental levels will become increasingly common in the 6th subrace of the 5th root race, and even more common in the next root race. Next, DK introduces one of the most referred to tabulations in all the blue books, entitled Microcosmic Sensory Evolution. The title immediately following this, the text immediately following this chart notes that no sensory correspondence is given for the 2 planes of abstraction, the atomic and subatomic subplanes of the Atmic and Buddhic planes. Not because these senses don't exist, but because, quote, they are beyond the concept of the evolving human unit. Next, DK gives us the same tabulation, but this time listed by sense rather than by plane and subplane in order to illustrate the unfoldment of each sense. This listing begins DK's in-depth analysis of each of the senses, beginning with hearing, which is associated with the physical plane. Next, we learned that on the 7th or lowest plane, man has to come to full cognizance of the effect of the sacred word as it is in process of sounding forth. So, full cognizance of the effect of the sacred word is hearing and understanding the voice of the silence, the still small voice of the soul. Next, we came to the passage we were studying when we left off last time. And we'll reread this passage and do a quick review of the first couple of points before getting into the material that we were looking at last time. Okay, could we get a reader, please?
Barbara, do you want to read?
Yes. The key for man to discover in turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of A, his own sound, B, his brother's sound, C, his group sound, D, the sound of that one of the heavenly men with whom he is connected, E, the sound of the logos or the sound of nature, of the solar system of the grand man of the heavens. Therefore, we note that on the physical plane, a man has to find his own note, finding it in spite of the density of the form. A, on the physical plane, he finds his own note. B, on the astral plane, he finds his brother's note. Through identity of emotion, he comes to the recognition of his brother's identity.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, first, the key for man to discover in turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of his own sound. One's own sound gradually comes to be known, as he says in here, discovered, through the long journey into self-awareness that culminates in soul infusion, and later through monadic identification. But for the personality, this sound is the voice of the soul. Unrecognized as such initially, but gradually and gradually understood soundlessly in its guidance, right? Eventually known for what it actually is. In Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, DK tells us that each of the rays emits its own sound, suggesting that finding one's own sound would also include entering the stream of one's personality and soul ray sounds. Next, the key for man to discover in turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of B, his brother sound. So because of the relevance and importance of this stage, a lot of us are working at this level. Let's reread the passage from Light of the Soul that we read last time. Can we get a reader, please?
Fred, do you want to read? Okay, comes up. There we go.
This Fred, I can read if there's nobody else available.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Fred.
There must be recognition of the contact that comes between two men who can see, hear, and touch each other. The superficial form recognition is the result, but another stage is possible wherein a man can pass behind the form and arrive at that which is the quality of his brother. He can touch that aspect of the consciousness which is analogous to his own. He becomes aware of the quality of his brother's life, of the nature of his plans, aspirations, hopes, and purposes. He knows his brother, and the better he knows himself and his own soul, the deeper will be his knowledge of his brother. Finally, he can identify himself with his brother and become as he is knowing and feeling as his brother's soul knows and feels. This is the meaning behind the occult words of St. John's epistle. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is.
Thank you, Fred. So, yeah, key here in this quote is the better he knows himself, he knows his brother, and the better he knows himself and his own soul, the deeper will be his knowledge of his brother. That ties these first two stages together. They're sequential. You have to, quote unquote, know thyself before you can truly recognize your brother's node. Okay, I want to remind you that these webinars are always more interesting when you participate. So anytime you have a question or a thought, jump in and we'll be glad to hear from you. Okay, next up, the key for man to discover in turn concerns itself with the revealing and the mystery of C, his group sound. The process of realizing and expressing one's group sound unfolds in three phases. Could we get a reader for this?
Gordon.
1. the stage of the burning ground, and the establishment of illumined group relation. This is revealed by the mind functioning as an aspect of group mind. I'm getting some kind of echo.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's not that bad.
Okay. 2. The stage of ashramic recognition and the establishing of a forward-moving group rhythm. These reciprocal activities produce a needed group tension. 3. The stage of emitting the group sound and the establishing of the power to invoke divinity, followed by a united group realization that God is fire.
Thank you.
yeah, Francis. I don't know what happens sometimes, but it's actually feedback coming from you, and I literally can't even hear myself right now while I'm talking. It's like a double robot of me.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I wasn't hearing that doubling.
Yeah, you don't hear it because it's from you.
It's from me?
Yeah, I don't know if it's feedback coming from your. Like, watch, mute yourself. If you muted yourself for a sec. Now there's no audio distortion for anybody, including me. But if you turn it back on, it only happens randomly, but right now it's happening consistently.
Oh, goodness. What can I
Do
do?
you have,
I mean,
is it
the audio
coming,
settings I've always used.
yeah, is it coming through your speaker
Yeah, it comes.
into your mic?
I can turn my speakers down. That should help some. Um, let's see here. Let's see if that helps.
That's weird. It's even doing it from your end when you speak now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the best thing is for me to go out and come back in. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll drop
Just
out.
try that.
You'll hold the meeting together.
Yeah.
So the meeting won't end.
No.
So that's what I need to do. Never had to do this. Let's see. How can I do that?
If you
How do I get out of here?
it'll be easier if you just now you see the leave button.
Oh yeah, I got it. Oh, I see. I needed to stop share. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Be right back.
Okay. Yeah, so here we are in quiet space, waiting for Francis to come back. I don't know what that issue is. If anybody's ever heard of it, I have not. Because it's coming right out of it, even when he talks. Mic, maybe his mic on his laptop's bad. So anybody that just joined, we're just basically resetting the Francis's connection because there was feedback. It's back. Welcome back. Brother Kuhn Master.
Yeah, okay. Well, so it took a little longer because I joined with a different link. Hang on a sec. Boy, it required me, that different link required me to reinstall Zoom. So hopefully,
You sound good.
yay. Okay, good, good, good.
No feedback.
All right, I'm working with my background right now. Come on, come on. It trashed my background. Oh, there it is. No, here we go. Sorry guys for all the technical stuff here. Hopefully we'll get going here in just a sec. All right. All right, good, good. Okay, so now back on. To the share and over here to. Okay, so we were talking about these stages where one comes into awareness of the group sound. And notice that at these three, the two are preliminary. It's not until the third stage that after the stage of the burning ground of the individual members, and then the ashramic recognition and a group rhythm is established, then finally you have the emitting of the group sound. So it's a very high stage of group integration where this goes. Now this list continues when we'll be looking at the last three stages of it in just a minute. Okay, so could we get a reader for this, please? This is this passage further explores the idea of group sound.
And Veronica, you want to read?
Yes, hello. Now comes the result of all these preliminary stages, and it comes spontaneously and automatically. I want to emphasize that the group does not wait in expectancy for a word to be given to it. It does not search and strive to discover a word. It does not take some word as may be suggested by a helpful disciple and then proceed to empower it. The word is the result of the point of tension. It emerges from the silence, and its first expression is simply the slowly rising tempo of the group. Sound or note. As you know, every individual and every group of individuals have their own peculiar note or sound, which is the creative agent of the focused group life. At this point, we can again touch the fringe of the coming signs of invocation. This group sound, rising as the tension increases and stabilizes in invocatory in effect and draws forth response eventually from the inner ashram owing to its relation to the outer group.
Thanks, Anne Veronica. Okay, and next, reader, please. This actually continues with that same passage.
Janet, you want to read?
Sure. Is this loud enough?
Yes.
Okay. When the response of the master is registered in the group consciousness and his potency is added to the potency of the group, the sound emitted by the group changes in quality. It's amplified and diversified, is enriched and then precipitated outside the ring past nod of the group lives. This precipitation takes the form of a word. This word being the result of the group activity, focus and tension, plus the aid of the master, brings about three results. One, it produces fusion. between the outer group and the inner ashram. 2, it enables the group life to be transferred along the group antakarana and focuses it once and for all in the master's ashram. 3, the result of this transference is twofold. A, the outer group dies, occultly speaking. B, the soul of the group, being now merged with the life aspect on levels higher than those of which the causal body exists, is no longer of major importance. The great renunciation takes place when the causal body, having served its purpose, dies and is destroyed.
Thank you. So this is very, very, very advanced stage. You're getting into 5th, 6th, 7th initiation level here. Okay. Next up, the key for man to discover in turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of D, the sound of that one of the heavenly men with whom he is connected. So all of humanity is connected with and through Sanat Kumara, our planetary logos, the one initiator. But when at the 4th initiation, initiate gains planetary consciousness and thus becomes a planetary citizen, he or she, depending on the initiate's ray type, also becomes consciously connected with one of the 7 heavenly men, according to his ray type. We get a sense of this level of consciousness in the following list of steps of the development of group sound, which continues the list we began previously. Can we get a reader for these 3 steps?
Yeah, Kirsten, do you want to read?
Yes. The states of a group sounding forth of the word and establishing direct relation with Shambhala as an integral part of the hierarchy. This means the enunciation of dual chord. 8. The states of responding to the higher aspects of the 7 ray lives and establishing contact with the 3 and the 1. This is done under the law of the supplementary 7. 9. The states of spiritual negation, as it is called. Establishes a new affirmative attitude and results in a recognition of the true nature of the one initiator.
Okay, thank you. Very high stages of becoming, but it's the natural extension of the process of preparing for and embedding the group sound. Yes, Barbara, go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering if these are sounds with physical material aspects to them, or subtle sounds. So there are Pythagorean sounds that really are embedded in the nature of matter. And then there are all sorts of sound systems that are likely to have some distortions that for us with Western music, Bach adjusted the tuning. So most of Western music is slightly out of tune. So I'm wondering the nature of these sounds.
Yeah, well, in reference to the group sound, you have the inner and the outer group, the ashramic group, which is not going to be emitting an outer sound, but the outer sound that is emitted by the outer group is dependent on and reflective of the inner sound gained through the inner hearing of the ashramic group. So that anchors that higher sound. Of course, as you mentioned, any outer sound is much distorted by comparison to the inner sound because we are as yet a non-sacred planet. But nonetheless, there is an anchoring of the quality of the inner ashramic sound through the outer group, and of course, sounds contained both tone and enunciated words. And so you have those two aspects to the sound as well. Anyone else?
Yeah, there's a question from Greg. Is this his personality ray type or his soul ray type, whereby he is to become associated with heavenly men? Or are we talking about the monadic ray type?
Yeah, since you entered the threshold of this stage of interfacing with a heavenly man, you have let go of the personality ray. You could say it's occultly no longer sounding. Now, if such a one as a fourth, fifth initiate incarnates, then they would have this ray, personality ray type, which would be chosen and emanating in accordance with the nature of their service, right? But the ray quality that would link one to the heavenly man would be the soul and monadic rays, because the fourth initiate at that stage is finally beginning to have some cognizance of the sound of the monadic ray. That's still not fully realized, but such a one, such a planetary citizen, quote unquote, would be fully expressive of their soul ray at that point. Anyone else? Good questions, guys. Thanks. Okay, so next up, finally, this is in this list. The key for man to discover and turn concerns itself with the revealing of the mystery of E, the sound of the Logos, or the sound of nature, of the solar system, of the grand man in the heavens. So let's take a look at MDR's thoughts on this point. Can we get a reader, please?
Magda, you want to read?
Magda,
Magdis.
you there?
Yeah, I see your mic open, but there's no audio.
Yeah, let's choose someone else, and then Magda, you can read the next time around, if you can find your way in.
Maria Christina.
More than one note seems to be here indicated.
Maria Christina, you're a little bit light on volume. Either get closer to your mic or...
Whoops. I just
Can't hear you now at all.
more than one note.
There we go. That's a little better. Just speak up.
More than one note seems to be here indicated. We have been told that the sound of nature, or the note of nature, is the note Fa, the green note. The note Fa applies not only to our Earth, with its obvious third ray correlated to Fa, but to the entire solar system. In System 1, the completion of the first breath, the culmination, was the sounding forth in note majestic of the note Fa. The note which forms the basic note of this system, the note of manifested nature. This note is, and to it must be supplemented the second note for this second system. It is not fully sounded or rounded out, nor to the end of the greater cycle will it be completed. The Logos sounds it now, and should he cease to breathe it forth, the whole system would disappear into complete obscuration. It would mark the end of manifestation. Letters on Occult Meditation 52. Yet, it would seem that a higher note of the solar Logos would be in need of discovery. The note of his soul nature, which may be, we are not told with complete certainty, the note soul. The method of apprehending this latter note would necessitate familiarity with the heart of the sun, by means of which the soul nature of the Logos may be dimly apprehended. Apprehension would also require entering that series of initiations which are called solar initiations, and which begin for humanity with the third degree. It is clear that detection of these sounds is related to detecting the major ray which conditions each of these 5 entities.
Thank you, Maria Christina. Okay, so what we're talking about here is the solologoic note, which would come to beginning with the 5th initiate, going on up through 6th and 7th initiations. Any thoughts or questions? Any further ideas about this? Yeah, you could see how far we travel from, discovering one's own note up through these 5 stages to discovering finally the sound of the Logos. Okay, next up. Therefore, we note that on the physical plane, a man has to find his own note, finding it in spite of the density of the form. So, one's own note is the note of the soul, but dense form also has a note that is for long eons so obtrusive as to drown out the soul note of the one immersed in the form world. Next, A. On the physical plane, he finds his own note. So DK is now adding the plane whereon each successive expansion is gained. Finding one's own note is the culmination of the long journey to know thyself. This is the note of the soul, the still small voice experienced through physical plane living. Keep in mind that it is the sense of hearing that is associated with this initial level, with the plane of hearing, with the sense of hearing, and with this initial level of becoming. And finally, in this passage, B, on the astral plane, he finds his brother's note. Through identity of emotion, he comes to the recognition of his brother's identity. So the astral plane is a plane of relationship, coming into emotional rapport with one's brother's activities. Sorry, with one's brother activates the energy of love wisdom, which is requisite for understanding the nature of our brother's identity. There's a deep connection between the Buddhic and astral planes in this way. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Marianne.
Okay. C. On the mental plane, he begins to find his group note. D. On the Buddhic plane or the plane of wisdom, he begins to find the note of his planetary logos, E. On the atmic or spiritual plane, the note logoic begins to sound within his consciousness. I am differentiating thus for the sake of clarity. In evolution itself, due to the parallelism of nature, the distinctions are not so sharply made, and a man's ray point of development, the work earlier accomplished, his temporary limitations and other causes create a seeming confusion, but in the great scheme, as seen from above downwards, the work proceeds as described.
Thank you. So first, on the mental plane, he begins to find his group note. So here, the astral relational orientation, where one, in this astral relational field of energy, one finds his brother's note. This gives way to mental inclusivity, with a focus now on group purpose and the role one plays in restoring the plan through group work. This is especially active now because of the preparation for group initiation that will come to the fore in the Aquarian age. Next, D, on the Buddhic plane, or the plane of wisdom, he begins to find the note of his planetary logos. Okay. During the third initiation, by the way, these pictures are just for fun. During the third initiation, which is the first solar initiation, the initiate gains a new level of access to the energy of the Buddhic plane. And through it, the nature of the note of the planetary logos begins to be heard. A much fuller revelation comes at the fourth initiation, when the consciousness of the initiate is no longer encumbered by the causal body on the higher mental plane. Finding the planetary note requires the intuition, a Buddhic sense, which correlates with the physical sense of taste. Next, on the atmic or spiritual plane, the note logoic begins to sound within his consciousness. So let's again take a look at what MDR has to say on this passage. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, I don't know. Magda, were you able to get your mic back?
Are you there, Magda? Doesn't look like it. Sound like it.
No, the mic's open. So just make sure if it's a Bluetooth, the power's on, if there's a power supply to it, or leave and come back.
Also, there's some of these headsets have a button that's not a software button, but a hardware button that you have to click to open your mic up. So some people, that will keep you from being able to speak. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay, Scott, do you want to read?
Sure. On the atmic or spiritual plane, the note logoic begins to sound within his consciousness. This is an interesting idea if pursued. The atmic plane is a plane of will and of intelligence. Since it's the third plane from above, it is ruled by Saturn and the third ray of abstract intelligence. Since the atmic plane is also the first of the Brahmic planes, it is related as well to the first ray. The solar logoic note, we are here told, is initially apprehended on the atmic plane, and presumably even more fully apprehended on the monadic level, which is still more resonant with the identity of the great solar god, expressing principally through the second ray. We're being told, in essence, that an apprehension of the note of the solar logos must be approached through will, even though love, wisdom, may be his principal note at this time. The Atmic plane is called not only the spiritual plane, but also the nirvanic plane. The nirvanic experience focused there is the beginning of intelligent and willing participation in solar logoic life. Entry into the stream of solar logoic life, as fully occurs on the monadic plane, is the first nirvana. Interestingly, the note Fa, the green note, connected with the third ray and Saturn, is the note of nature, and the note which resounded at the close of the first solar system. From the Atmic plane, resonance may be established with this particular note of the logos as a point of departure for apprehending a still deeper note based on love, wisdom, and positioned at a higher frequency than the note of nature. That note, the note hypothesized as G or soul, is closely related to the monadic plane.
Thank you, Scott. So it's the note following Fa, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, right? And sometimes it's just written as so, S-L, S-O. But of course, when you add the L, you see the definite connection with the solar logoic. And with the second aspect, as opposed to the third, which comes through the green note of Fa. Yeah, and yes, Barbara.
So some of the sacred geometry specialists feel that you can't have sound without light, that they are that light has to create the geometry for sound. So I think when he says the fa, the green note is some hint in that direction, that they are tied together esoterically.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that this this idea of synesthesia, which is that you see sound and you hear color because they both occur. I was with a spiritual teacher where this was a common, frequent occurrence for that person, and certainly at these levels, you would be dealing with the energy of both colors / light and these creative sounds, right? Yeah, good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Any other thoughts or questions about this? It's a really great passage that Michael brought forward here. Yes, Magda, let's see if we can hear you this time. We're not hearing you. We also called on you to read when we couldn't hear you. So there's something, maybe you need to take out your microphone and plug it back in or check your sound settings, but somehow you're not coming through. Sorry, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but there we have it. Let's see here. Yeah. Another thing you could do, Magda, is just is to leave and come back. We were having problems with feedback from my audio, and that's what I did, and that fixed it. So maybe it'll work for you too. So
She did,
okay, good.
but it didn't fix it. So
Didn't fix it.
no,
Wow.
the mic is open, but there's no sound. So if you just check your sound settings to see if the mic is selected, just select another mic and
right? Yeah, you work on that, and we'll continue. But once we get it working, we can come back to your thought on that. Okay, finally, I am differentiating thus for the sake of clarity, meaning these 5 steps that he's just gone through of how sound, of which notes are sounded on which planes. In evolution itself, due to the parallelism of nature, the distinctions are not so sharply made. In a man's ray, point of development, the work earlier accomplished, his temporary limitations, and other causes create a seeming confusion. But in the great scheme, as seen from above downwards, the work proceeds as described. So DK here suggests that clarity of understanding of a human being's progress through the 5 stages of hearing, as here listed, is the province of those who can view the evolutionary process from above downwards. For those in the midst of this unfoldment, many factors such as ray type and past experience determine the specifics of their unfoldment. I thought it was interesting, this work, this word, what's he said here? Parallelism of nature. That suggests that there are parallel developments, and then he lists the nature of some of those developments, such as man's ray, the work earlier accomplished, etc. So these create uneven development, and so you don't have it so clearly unfolding as is described on the list. Our multi-lifetime evolutionary process is a progressive series of broadening and deepening identifications, each of them related to a certain vibratory level of the cosmic physical plane, with each plane broadening and deepening our relationship to sound in order that we may one day hear and know the one sound. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Tom, do you want to read?
Yep. Hearing on the astral plane is commonly called clairaudience and means the ability to hear the sounds of the astral plane. It is a faculty that demonstrates throughout the entire astral body, and a man hears all over his vehicle, and not only through the specialized organs, the ears, the products of physical plane action and reaction. This would necessarily be so owing to the fluidic nature of the astral body. Man on the physical plane hears at the same time a certain range of sounds, and only a small and particular gamut of vibrations impinges upon his ears. There are many of the lesser sounds of nature which entirely escape him, while the major group sounds are not differentiated at all.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, first, hearing on the astral plane is commonly called clairaudience and means the ability to hear the sounds of the astral plane. Clairaudience, along with clairvoyance, is one of the main means of telepathic registration. In Initiation, Human and Solar DK tells us, quote, "It is not necessary nor advisable to develop the synthetic faculties or clairaudience and clairvoyance until after the 3rd initiation. This is so, presumably because that which is gained through these 2 astral senses is too potent for the personality-oriented aspirant to usefully assimilate, but also because unless under the guidance of a master, that which is astrally sensed can be easily misunderstood, misinterpreted, and especially overemphasized, thus plunging the sensitive acolyte into deeper glamour. Can we get a reader for this section, please?
Yeah, Barbara, do you want to read again?
I have several times used the expression the premature awakening of the psychic powers. By that I mean the abnormal unfoldment of the powers of clairvoyance and of clairaudience, so that the entire lower levels of the astral plane stand revealed. Though the possessor of these powers can neither control the phenomenon of subtle sight and hearing, nor interpret correctly what he sees and hears. In the earlier animal or savage stage, these faculties are frequently normal, and there is no mental reaction of any kind, and therefore no undue strain is put upon the nervous system and the brain. There's what I might call a flat or unemotional acquiescence in the condition which is due to the complete lack of the interpretive sense and of the dramatic self-conscious attitude of the man who is beginning to use his mind. The moment the I consciousness becomes uppermost, then the possession of these lower psychic powers becomes a hindrance and a complication. Temporarily, they must be thrust into the background in order that the mind principle may assert its control, and the life of the soul can then flow out into matured and considered expression upon the physical plane. The relegation of the psychic powers to a position below the threshold of consciousness is the intent of the development planned for the Aryan race. AP.
Okay, any thoughts about this? Yeah, we always imagine that the senses that stand higher in relation to the physical senses are desirable and should be cultivated. But here's an exception to that rule. There's a time and place for this development, and that is after there's full soul control, which happens at the third initiation. Then it becomes safe to develop these clairaudience and clairvoyance. Okay, next up. It is a faculty that demonstrates throughout the entire astral body, and a man hears all over his vehicle, and not only through the specialized organs, the ears, the product of physical plane action and reaction. This would necessarily be so, owing to the fluidic nature of the astral body. So we might hypothesize that this non-local sensory perception is true for all the astral senses, not just for hearing. MDR gives us an astrological perspective on this. Can we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, you want to read again?
Yes. One of the key rulers of the systemic physical level is Saturn, the planet of space, time, and localization. The astral plane is, however, ruled by Neptune, which blurs distinction and eradicates boundaries. Under Neptune, it is reasonable that sensitivity should be more generalized and not so particularly focused through concrete localized organs of reception.
Thank you, Anne Veronica. Okay, next and finally, man on the physical plane hears at the same time a certain range of sounds, and only a small and particular gamut of vibrations impinges upon his ears. There are many of the lesser sounds of nature which entirely escape him, while the major group sounds are not differentiated at all. So the normal range of hearing for humans is 20 to 20,000 hertz. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, thunder, and ocean waves all fall below the range of human hearing, called infrasonics. Also, some elephant communication is in this very low frequency range. As to the frequencies above human hearing, we have echolocation of bats at 120,000 hertz. Also, dolphins communicate at frequencies beyond human hearing. Lightning, high-speed winds, meteorites entering the atmosphere, and even the movement of tectonic plates can generate frequencies beyond the range of human hearing. There are also many sounds that are too soft for humans to hear, such as plants growing, snow falling, the sound of breezes, and insect movement. In addition, DK's statement, the major group sounds are not differentiated at all, suggests a different type of sound altogether, unavailable to humans, not because of the limitations of the ear, but because of limitations of one's consciousness. Such sounds might include the subjective note sounded forth by the kingdoms of nature, of nations and races, of a great forest or mountain. MDR notes that, quote, that, quote, Saturn is the planet of limitation, and under Saturn's rulership of the physical plane, the range of impressionability is naturally limited. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Yeah, two comments. Maria Christina says the thought of the Davic realms come to mind with the interrelation of sound and color, hearing and seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Magda says fa is the note following the halftone E, so comes after a leap that changes direction within the octave. The next leap, the bigger one, comes after the B note, the seventh one. There we have the change of octave going to the next ascendant in the evolutionary Christic path 1. The regressive path on the opposite side is the going back towards the previous notes of that same octave, in our context going back to Saturn, as she understands it.
Well, that's a great comment. Yeah, the specifics of the scale and the relations to it. I like the idea of the fall note being me. Of course, we know that orange, which is also includes the deep yellow of fall foliage, and DK cites this, sounds this note. Okay, thanks for that, Magda.
And
Okay.
this one more from Greg. From a scientific perspective, our Earth, for example, is emulating between 8 and 10 cycles per minute, which involves the entire planetary logoic energy. And as the magnetic field continues to shift, and with relation to levels of awareness in the human brain, measured by EKGs, we can also make a potentially similar correlation, although we may not yet be fully able to hear these frequencies via our physical ears.
Yeah, being 8 to 10 cycles is well below physical hearing. That's fascinating. I did not know that about the physical note of the Earth. Interesting. Yeah, there's so much that we are going to be coming into awareness of as we gain soul understanding. then through the intuition, and be able to apply these sounds, these unheard sounds, to our understanding of spiritual awareness, of spiritual reality. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Fred, do you want to read?
You there, Fred?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you want Fred or you want Greg?
Fred,
Okay.
you said you didn't want to. Okay, Gordon.
As evolution proceeds and the inner sense of hearing becomes acute, these other physical plane sounds will likewise swing into his ken, and he will be acutely conscious of all sounds on the astral and the physical plane, a thing which, if possible now, would result in the shattering of the body. If the note of nature, for instance, were to strike but once upon the ear of a man, a note made up of the totality of vibrations produced by all dense material forms, his physical body would be completely disrupted.
Thank you. Okay.
And speaking of sound, I'm definitely, when I speak, the feedback's back with your mic. No one else has had it, but Gordon just started interacting with your mic too. So
I'm sure I'm hearing that.
No, you don't. You wouldn't. It's somehow feeding back through you. If you just mute when somebody speaks.
Okay, that's easily done.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let's pick up these chats if there's, yeah, Joe says, yes, I get that feedback as well. So are you hearing it while I'm speaking? I hope not.
No, not now. No.
Oh, okay, excellent. So I can easily mute. It's just an extra step, but I could do that. Okay, and Greg says, and these frequencies are also, these frequencies are also beginning to accelerate into higher cycles. PS might be cycles per second rather than cycles per minute. Yeah, probably so. Let's see if anyone else. Right, okay, that does it. Okay, so first up, as evolution proceeds and the inner sense of hearing becomes acute, these other physical plane sounds will likewise swing into his ken. The phrase, as evolution proceeds, suggests that inner hearing sensitivity is gained through our spiritual progression, particularly through soul contact, when we are finally able to respond to the voice of the soul. The phrase inner sense of hearing suggests that ears, this is kind of an obvious point, ears are not the only means of experiencing sound, just as eyes are not needed for inner sight. Next, and he will be acutely conscious of all sounds on the astral and the physical plane. And yet, to avoid a cacophonous roar, the initiate, I'm assuming that such a one would be an initiate, would have to have developed a way of screening out unwanted sounds, possibly through the ability to direct his or her attention to the relevant sounds, such as the still small voice of the soul. And next, a thing which, if possible now, would result in the shattering of the body. Sound both creates and destroys. development of bodies with a high degree of atomic matter, as well as the ability to choose the sounds or focus in on the sounds one is capable of receiving, and at the same time screen unwanted sounds, would be necessary to become, quote, acutely conscious of all sounds on the astral and physical plane. Next, if the note of nature, for instance, were to strike but once upon the ear of a man, and a note made up of the totality of vibrations produced by all dense material forms, his physical body would be completely disrupted. So first, through this statement, we learn that there is a unified note of nature, which is, quote, made up of the totality of vibrations produced by all dense material forms. Even though this note is a composite of all material forms, it is nonetheless a subjective and synthetic note requiring inner hearing to perceive such a note and a robust physical, astral, and mental vehicle to withstand the impact of such hearing. Through this statement, we get just a peek into the complex reality of collective sound. Okay. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yes. Janet, do you want to read?
Sure. He is not ready yet for such a happening. The inner ear is not duly prepared. Only when the threefold hearing is consummated will completed hearing on the physical plane be likewise permitted. The hearing on the mental plane is simply an extension of the faculty of differentiating sound. The hearing dealt on all these planes is a hearing that has to do with the form, that concerns the vibration of matter, and that is occupied with the not self. It has not to do with the psyche or the telepathic communication that proceeds from mind to mind, but with the sound of the form or that power whereby one separated unit of consciousness is aware of another unit who is not himself. Bear this carefully in mind. When an extension of hearing becomes such that it concerns the psyche, then we call it telepathy, or that wordless communication that is the synthesis of hearing on all the three lower planes, and which is known by the ego and the causal body of the formless levels on the mental plane.
Thank you, Janet. Hopefully, let's see, I muted during that, and hopefully that took out any of that echoing sense. Okay, first, he is not ready yet for such a happening. The inner ear is not duly prepared. Only when the threefold hearing is consummated will completed hearing on the physical plane be likewise permitted. Notice that permission must be granted for the acolyte to have the experience of quote unquote completed hearing on the physical plane, suggesting that some kind of protective veil is lifted, probably at the time of some initiation. Including the above citing, there are a total of 10 references in the Blue Books to the term inner ear, which together form a picture of this method of reception. We'll take a look at just two of these passages. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah. Kirsten, do you want to read?
Yes. This training in the sound of the aum is an unconscious preparation for the dual work of spiritual creation. And facility comes as the attentive aspirant accustoms himself to hear within his brain the soundless sound of Om. I would suggest here that students accustom themselves to work in this manner, sounding the word audibly and with much frequency at the close of the morning meditation, but emphasizing in the early part that close attention to the inaudible hearing which will develop the sensitivity of the inner ear, the etheric ear. Later, when the personal note or sound is established and the inner sound is sensed, there can be definite practice in blending the two. This entails the closest attention.
Thank you. Interesting here that, this isn't a passive process of development. He's suggesting that we emphasize in the early part of the meditation to pay close attention to inaudible hearing. It's not something we even think to do necessarily, right? And it's this directed attention that can develop the sensitivity of the inner ear, the etheric ear. This is a clue. I hadn't noticed this before. This inner ear he relates to the etheric ear. Very interesting. Okay, next up, reader, please.
Marianne?
Fire is a sum total of that which destroys form, produces completely purity in that which is not itself, generates the warmth which lies behind all growth and is vitality itself. This initiate realization is all brought about by the sudden appreciation or apprehension of sound, by the awakening of the inner ear to the significance of the voice, just as the disciple in the earlier stage awakened to the significance of vision. That is why at the third initiation, the initiate sees the star and hears the sound. At the first two initiations, he sees the light and hears the word. But this is something different and is the higher correspondence to the earlier experience.
Thank you. So in this passage, we learn the difference in the function of the inner ear for those at the level of the first and second initiations, during which one, quote, sees the light and hears the word, compared to those at the level of the third initiation, which time one, quote, awakens by means of the inner ear to the significance of the voice. Okay, back to the passage. We might assume that by the term threefold hearing, DK is referring to hearing on the etheric, physical, astral, and mental planes. If so, then DK seems to be inferring that development of threefold hearing prepares the inner ear for the experience of full physical plane hearing, which would include, for instance, the impact of the note of nature. I think the key here is that the soul is involved in this process. That's part of the development of especially the mental hearing. Then the soul overshadows and guides the entire process of hearing. Okay, I see a whole bunch of chats. Let's see here. These act like. Okay, let's see what we got here.
I posted a link to the Schumann resonance, which is what Greg was talking about, and then Greg further
Oh, I see here. Yeah. Where he said
added,
one last reference.
yeah, he added more, and he also commented about Rule 7, where it says, let the group life emit the word of invocation and thus evoke response within those distant ashrams where move the chohans of the race of men. They are no longer men, as are the masters, but having passed beyond that lesser stage, have linked themselves with the great council in the highest secret place. Let the
Right.
group sound, a dual chord reverberating in the halls where move the masters, but finding pause and prolongation within those radiant halls where move the lights which carry out the will of God.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Yeah. And it's through hearing that these are first contacted. So often hearing is the threshold sense for contact. At least that seems to be what we're being taught.
And then
Yeah, go ahead.
this edition down here, because the last reference was talking about the main four states of the human brain, which is beta, alpha, theta, delta, theta being basically in tune generally with earth frequency, but it is the meditative state. Beta is the one that's most used in like fight or flight, anxiety, things like this. Also, when I went to adding some personal experience, when I used to go to these conferences, and one of the guys was talking about how the electric grid operates all the way, up to 60 hertz. And he was discussing how our rubber soled shoes blocked us from grounding out that high frequency hertz range. So we were lit up like a light bulb at that vibration and never getting back grounded out to link to the earth frequency.
Yeah, I heard that same thing. This idea of earthing, comes in here too, where how necessary it is to ground ourselves. And it's a form of rest. It's a much needed form of rest because we can't really determine the effect of these frequencies on our systems. Thank you. Okay. All right, here next. Hearing on the mental plane is simply an extension of the faculty of differentiating sound. The ability to differentiate is clearly a mental function. One might have perfect hearing, but unless one learns to identify the specific relevance of a sound, that sound, though physically heard, is not recognized and understood for what it truly is. For example, musicians work with subtleties of phrasing that is lost on many who come to hear them. An ace mechanic hears the same complex sounds when he or she listens to a car engine as anyone else does, but his or her ability to differentiate allows him or her to diagnose how well that engine is running just through the sense of sound. These examples apply the, quote, faculty of differentiating sound to sounds heard on the physical plane. In a treatise on why magic DK describes sound on the mental plane, which is called higher clairaudience. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Scott, you want to read?
This form of work might be divided into three methods. There is first the higher clairaudience that speaks directly from mind to mind. This is not exactly telepathy, but a form of direct hearing. The teacher will speak to the disciple as person to person. A conversation is therefore carried on entirely on mental levels, with the higher faculties as the focusing point. The use of the head centers is involved, and they must both be vivified before this method can be employed.
Thank you, Scott. So next, the hearing dealt with on all these planes is the hearing that has to do with the form, that concerns the vibration of matter, and that is occupied with the not self. So, I'm just wondering out loud here, by quote unquote on all these planes, does DK mean those planes so far covered the physical, astral, mental planes? Or does he mean the 5 planes listed in this chart that describe successive qualities of the sense of hearing? Yes, Joe.
Breaking my silence. I'm really overwhelmed with sounds today. Let's start there. And that's why I chose not to read. But I want to tell you that way back in 1982, when I went to live in an ashram under the auspices of Yogananda, I was told that the highest mantra of all was Om. And I decided if that was the highest, shouldn't I do that? And I think that has made a difference. As Greg has contributed and I have contributed, I can see that the range from the high to the low is involved in the overwhelm that is now occurring. There's so much going on in the world. Not only do we have this incredible physical expression, but we also have had the speaking at the United Nations that puts us in great danger of the beginning of the Third World War. It's amazing, and that's all I'll say, I guess.
Okay, yes. As we know from the OM and the AUM, that these are great fields or categories of sound emanation that direct the devas in their building, but they also are invocative of higher forces when used with consciousness. Okay, his next statement makes me think that he's, I was wondering whether he was talking about when he says that the hearing dealt with on all these planes, whether it's just the 3 lower planes or the higher 5. And this statement makes me think that he means the lower 3 planes. Mental hearing has not to do with the psyche or the telepathic communication that proceeds from mind to mind, but with the sound of the form or that power whereby one separated unit of consciousness is aware of another unit who is not himself. Bear this carefully in mind. So, sound is the sense most associated with both form and the not self, whereas telepathic communication is a direct registration in the physical brain consciousness of information soundlessly received and imparted by one capable of communicating telepathically. This is subtly different than higher clairvoyance, wherein speech impression, as was described by Scott in this passage here, communicative mind to mind is employed. We learn in AAB's unfinished biography that DK began his work with her using higher clairaudience. But after the first book or so, she was able to shift to telepathic receptivity. Finally, we have, and this will be it for today, when the extension of hearing becomes such that it concerns the psyche, then we call it telepathy, or that wordless communication That is the synthesis of the hearing on all the three lower planes, and which is known by the ego and the causal body on the formless levels of the mental plane. So of particular importance here is that telepathy is, quote, known by the ego in the causal body on the formless levels of the mental plane. This soul involvement shifts telepathy, as here defined, beyond being just another form of communication. Note that in the chart of the senses, spiritual telepathy is the sense given for the highest subplane of the mental plane. The spiritual in spiritual telepathy relates it to the spiritual triad, of which the highest mental subplane is the lowest point. The fact that these telepathic impressions are known by the ego suggests that they carry a very high vibratory quality. Okay, I think we'll stop there instead of going into this hearing on the Buddhic plane. Any final thoughts or comments? I'm looking at the chats here.
There's two,
Okay.
Magda and Roz.
You want to go?
Okay. Magda linked to what she posted earlier, transporting the musical scale I was commenting on before into our context. C, D, E, first logos. F, G, A, B, second logos. Old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, Earth, Mars, Earth, Mercury, new Jupiter, new Venus. With a new higher C, with a new Vulcan, it starts the new higher octave, Elias, the third logos. Are we at the end of Earth Mars inaugurating Earth Mercury? This is her speculation. And Roz, sometimes when singing, I am transported to a level where I can see lights. Intuitively, it seems like it is beings on a higher level. Could this be possible?
Certainly, it could be possible. Yeah, you could be experience a form of clairvoyance or even higher clairvoyance, depending on level, the quality of things. Interesting that it comes through singing. That can pitch one into higher states of receptivity, for certain, right? We don't have time to comment on Magda's. This is a very interesting passage, Magda. I'm assuming this is anthroposophy, that your thoughts are coming through anthroposophy. I can't say this isn't anything that occurs in DK's teaching, but it's interesting. The assignation of specific notes to the three logoi is quite interesting. So, okay, you all, that's going to do it for today.